What an absolutely awesome weekend we have shaping up for you. Another edition of Outspoken. I'm Dan Sileo, NC2A. The start of Major League Baseball this week has been absolutely awesome. Guys, fire the cannons. All right, we first have to start off here with Tiger Woods and his DUI. I mean, where are we going here with Tiger Woods? One of the most compelling athletes in American sports history. I became a fan of Tiger Woods back in 97 when he was chasing down a Masters championship. We all did. It was compelling theater. Watching an African-American kid in a predominantly white sport, dominating the sport, watching greatness, watching him in this sport, it compelled us all to watch and want more Tiger Woods. He is truly an appointment-setting athlete. This is a guy people want to watch and people want to see. He's one of the most compelling figures that I've covered and been around. By the way, played a couple rounds of golf with him when he lived at Islesworth in the Orlando area. Unfortunately, here we are. Another rollover accident, the second one in the last 5 years. I mean, initially he takes a breathalyzer. It comes back 0-0. Then he refuses a urinalysis test, which basically put him in the can. They arrested him, and he was released hours later. And again, we'll be pending court case here coming up and seeing how this thing plays out. Tiger, I got to put it out here to you, man. People look up to you. You know, young kids look up to you. Your kids look up to you. Your son, your daughter. You got people who love watching you play. And here you are, reckless off the course. I mean, you have no respect for yourself. You just have zero respect for yourself off the course. I'm going to make a comment here on him, on what could have been. 15 major championships. We're rooting for you, dude. We're rooting for you to go by Jack. Unfortunately, you'll never go by Jack, even if you do get the 18 majors, which is highly unlikely now. You know, now we're at this point. Before in the first rollover, when he was at the Genesis 5 years ago, we were like, my God almighty, I hope Tiger Woods is okay. Now, you know what we're saying here? We're saying, hey, I hope you don't kill anybody. And then I hope you don't kill yourself. I mean, you're a danger to a community now. My daughter, your daughter out there, when Tiger Woods is behind the wheel right now, he's reckless. But then again, he's been reckless his entire life. Hey, dude, you're not 25 years old any longer chasing Perkins waitresses in parking lots. You're a dude now that is a compelling figure that's one of the faces, if not the face of the PGA, that is going to make decisions on the future of the PGA scheduling. You're battling right now with LIV. You're trying to make the PGA more compelling for people to want to watch. I was looking forward to watching you at the Augusta National on Thursday and Friday. Now, where are we here? I mean, look, you've not only let a nation down, you've let yourself down. You're one of the athletes now that we're saying this. You become a punchline. And on top of that, we're now doing this, what could have been. Instead of being tied with Sam Snead for the most PGA victories, instead of being 3 behind Jack for the major championships at 15, what could have been, dude? Jack Nicklaus was right. You should have blown by Jack with at least 25 major championships. But because of your recklessness off the course, you're here. What could have been? Here's a guy is the most talented golfer in the history of the sport. And you know what? He has now become that guy where you say, what could have been? This could have been even greater. Jack Nicklaus had his priorities in order when he was a young guy. Thank God he had Barbara with him. I mean, Jack Nicklaus is a family man. He's a man of God. He's a person that respected his sport. Tiger, hey, dude, you don't respect yourself. I mean, as we move forward in this, I don't know. Do you grow up by the time you turn 50 here? Hoss, you got to have more respect for yourself, or guess what? This thing's not ending good for you. I mean, what a tragedy. In a way, it's a tragedy. Hey, you may kill somebody out there, guy. Think about others and not just yourself. All right. JSN of the Seattle Seahawks. What an absolutely incredible deal that JSN signs. He gets $120 million in guarantees. He signs a $168 million contract. How about this here? 42 large, $42.1 million per year. This is telling you exactly where the league is going. Hey, man, the years of the running back in the day in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, those years are gone. This all comes down to this now, betting, prop betting. People want to see high-scoring ball games. Can you imagine this? You're making $42 million a year now. You touch the football as an average of 5 times a game. This is exactly what the league wants. The league wants to see, again, they want to see high scoring, 33-31 games, prop bets. You're going to be able to make bets from your seat sitting at a stadium near you. I mean, quarterbacks, wide receivers, big scoring, big money. You see all the draft choices coming out this year, right? Look at all the wide receivers that are going to be in the National Football League draft. There's no running backs that are going to go in the first round. It's all wideouts, quarterbacks. That's where the league is heading. 42.1 large for JSN. Also, NBA now. So they're talking expansion. So the owners and the governors, as we say now, are now compelled to take a look at exploring expansion to Seattle and Las Vegas. Hey, this just in. Really? We're now in Vegas? So you're telling me we got a pro football team and we got an NBA team potentially in Las Vegas? I thought gambling was forbidden. Well, here we are. I guess things have changed a little bit, but hey, Seattle had great fans when they had the Sonics up there. KD was supposed to be like the last superstar up there. They ended up getting that team down to OKC. OKC, sellout crowds every night. It was an absolute grand slam moving that team to Oklahoma City. And they're the reigning champions now. So that's been a good experience. But getting it back to Seattle, I think would be a great thing. Hey, look, my problem is not with the expansion of the league. My problem is with the dudes in the league. I mean, hey, guys, 65 games. It's mandatory for you to be able to have to play, for you to win a Defensive Player of the Year or the MVP award. You mean I've got to compel you and force you to play and show up every night to work? Can you imagine that? You're sitting around and you're a consumer who wants to go to a ball game. You show up to a game and Katie's powdering his nose because why? He doesn't want to play back-to-backs? Or you got LeBron James not wanting to play? Hey, I pay those tickets to go watch the superstars play, and these guys, again, at the end of the day, they don't want to show up and play? Well, why would I be compelled to show up and want to go and watch a ball game? You know, the famous line, wake me up in June. It still holds for me. Your NBA All-Star game was a train wreck. The regular season you could care less about, and people want to expand? Look, I don't have any problems with the NBA fan. I have no problems with the NBA fans. Then again, I have no problem with American fans. American sports fans want more live sports broadcasting. That's what compels these networks to stay on the air. You can't talk to me about expansion, and you got players who don't want to expand their thoughts on the game and promote the game. Come on, dude. Hey, I'll say this again about Adam Silver. Come on, Hoss. You got to get these players to sit down. We're talking about tanking, and we're talking about load management, and you want to expand your sport? Do the fans a favor. Have your guys show up to the barns every night and want to play and have a love of the sport. That might be helpful. You want to take your flags and you want to put it in a city like Seattle. You want to put it in Las Vegas. I get it. Okay, I do. But do something with the players that are in the sport that are supposed to be the guys selling the sport. You're telling me, man, come on now. Expanding the sport. How about expanding the game of the players that want to play 80-plus games? All right, folks, my great friends at Morgan & Morgan, the #1 injury law firm in all of America for a reason. My friends here, man, I've known them for over 25 years. Ultima and John Morgan built this as a family business. The family in Pennsylvania that was initially offered $650K ended up getting nearly $30 million. Or the family in Florida that was initially offered $350K, they got $12 million in a settlement. Easiest decision you'll ever make in your life. Go to forthepeople.com/big cells or pound law 529. That's forthepeople.com/big cells or pound law 529. And do me a favor, you tell them Big Sills sent you. NCAA tournament. Coach James Young, he sets us off and tips us off next right here on SportsGrid. There's no doubt one of the greatest times of the year is the NCAA tournament. Compelling stories started on Thursday and Friday. I mean, the ratings for the NCAA tournament have been off the charts. 10 million people have tuned in to watch these games each and every single night, whether it's on CBS, True TV, TBS, or TNT. It's been some great storylines. Every single team that you thought was going to have a shot for a national championship, in my opinion, they came through, and really, you're seeing some great, compelling stories. You're seeing great coaches. By the way, too, I love when the fact when you get a chance to interview guys like Dan Hurley or you get to interview Tom Izzo, and they start talking about hard coaching, or Rick Pitino and these guys that are clearly telling you, indeed, how they coach their teams. I love it. Hard coaching, in my opinion, I heard some great things that were said by Tom Izzo. He said, one of the questions that was asked to him on coaching kids hard today, he's like, hey, Dan Hurley even said it. Our guys, without a doubt, are coached soft. Coach James Young was mentioning this last week about certain guys on how they coach their players. Hey, don't get pissed off at anybody if these guys get coached hard. Just don't get ticked off. And Dan Hurley said this: I'm preparing my players for life, not just a ball game and not just a 40-minute ball game. I'm preparing people for life here. So again, at the end of the day here, man, I saw some great things. We bring in, he tips it off for us as always, Coach James Young. How you doing, my friend? I love some of those comments that were made by Izzo and Dan Hurley and Rick Pitino about coaching kids hard, man. I love some of those pressers.
You know what? Great to be on you, Big Sills. And listen, I'm old school, okay? I'm 49 years old. I grew up with days of watching Bob Knight, of John Thompson, and even guys like Louis Carnesecca. And I want people to understand this. At times, I feel like we've gone soft, and we've allowed the game to be taken over by the kids, the players, the agents, so on and so forth. What I love about Izzo, what I love about Hurley, I mean, did people listen to how Zuby Ejiofor talked about Rick Pitino last night and thanked Rick Pitino for his own? I saw Rick Pitino getting in the kid's face in the last 10 seconds because he didn't foul fast enough. I mean, this is where we're at, folks. I am from the mindset of, as coaches, we have an obligation, Big Sills, and your obligation is not just to the kid there. It's in life. And I want to thank you because you helped me have on Phil Martelli on my Coach's Edge with JY. And this is what Coach Martelli talked about being able to go to a kid's wedding, about when you get your first job or you go through that first trial and tribulation, you call on your coach. People have to understand this. You are a coach for a kid for life, not for the couple of years, but for life. And for all these people who want to transfer kids 2, 3, 4 times, go look at the teams that are in the NCAA tournament that are making deep runs where the majority of their kids have been there, either as a freshman recruit or all the way through. Houston, Purdue, UConn, Michigan State, all 5 starters were all original recruits for Tom Izzo. You go to the women's side with Gino Auriemma and UConn. Being coached hard is okay. If you're a coach that just make sure you let your kids know what you did wrong, but then correct them, just like you had, obviously, when you played for the U, for Jimmy Johnson. It's like Jimmy Johnson don't think that Jimmy Johnson's on Fox Sports. Jimmy Johnson got in your ass a little bit. So make sure you understand, folks, hard coaching is good coaching, and it's part of life.
Yeah, I tell people that guy you see on Fox, that's not the guy that coached me. Because I tell them all the time, hey, dude, don't get fooled. That's not the dude that coached me down at the University of Miami. Hey, okay, let's start there then. Duke St. John's, 80-75 with about 3 minutes left. Pitino had a 1-point lead in that game. What were your takeaways on that game?
Well, I think, listen, people are going to talk about the kid Ruben Frey, and he should have got more time. He had 3 threes in the first half, 1 in the second half. Folks, listen, Ruben had a great game. But you got Bryce Hopkins for a reason. You have the biggest player of the year in Zuby Ejiofor. You have Dylan Mitchell. You had your guys. You rode with them. I get it. I understand what Pitino did because I've done it on the sidelines myself. His guard play was suspect. Jansen, Sandin, they were terrible. And that's how they lost the game. Sellouts was a little bit off. And they got away from what they needed to do. And I thought Zuby should have been better. But on the flip side, John Shire was masterful, Big Sills, and I'm talking about masterful. High ball screen, and it could have been any combination between Evans, Foster, and Boozer. And it created downhill action, and then it created switches and mismatches, and John Shire kept going to it time and time again. And that's what's great about what these coaches do, like John Shire. When your game plan blows up, throw it away, fix it. He was down 55-47. He went to the high ball screen action when he got in half-court offense, and the rest was history. But Sills, it's a shame that this was a Sweet 16 matchup. This had a Final Four intensity and a Final Four feel. And I still say that St. John should not have been in that region with UConn.
I got to ask you, why is the culture at Duke continuing after Coach K, and say the culture at UNC is not continuing? Because to me, if you closed your eyes, you could have swore that Coach K was on the side there coaching that Duke team. It just looks like they've continued that culture there. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, you could say that. Listen, at the end of the day, Big Seals, talent wins. And that Cam Boozer is one hell of a player with the rest of the Duke team. And I want to make sure I say this because I'm a coach. So I've been part of staffs that have been let go. I love Hubert Davis. I think he's a phenomenal person. I think he's a very good coach. But it's tough. You're a Carolina guy. Folks, Dean Smith, Bill Guthridge, Matt Doherty, Roy Williams, Hubert Davis. In the last 50 to 60 years, they've had Carolina guys. It's time that they break the mold and go away from the Carolina tree, kind of like what they did with bringing in, obviously, Kevin Willard of Villanova for breaking the Jay Wright, Lorley Massimino tree you know about as well, Big Sills. Get the right coach. The right coach, folks, I would go get Billy Donovan out of Chicago. They're rebuilding. It's a good fit. He's a college coach, and he's developed pros, and that's what matters in today's college game.
Look what he did at Florida. I mean, I covered that team when I was in Florida, and I got to tell you, that guy just absolutely built that basketball program up when Joakim Noah and with Al Horford, and those guys were just absolutely awesome in recruiting. At a football school, Coach, they ended up winning back-to-back national championships. We'll continue more of the conversation on the NCAA. By the way, Isaiah Thomas made a comment about the Chicago Bulls. We got to talk to Coach Young next here on SportsGrid. All right, little more here on the NCAA tournament here with Coach James Young as he joins us here each and every single weekend here. And were you surprised, first, a little more in the NCAA on what Illinois did to Houston? I mean, you and I had been talking about that team, that they could shoot the ball from the three. They're a perimeter team, but, man, they went up and down in transition. And were you a little shocked what happened to Houston in this game?
I was, in regards to the fact that I always take Houston to win a national championship. And by Lord, I hope Kelvin Sampson gets one before he retires. And Big Sills, if he doesn't, I don't want him to be judged on not getting one. So I think he's that great of a coach. The problem with Houston Big Sills is they've fallen into lulls of offensive futility. And it happened again. Chris Sinak was not good. Kingston Flemings doesn't shoot the ball enough from three. Miles Uzon had an up and down season. And you had a team that was Houston-esque in toughness, won the rebounding battle by 9, and had more guard play. And at the end of the day, as great as Calvin Sampson is stopping people from scoring, and he held the number one offensive team efficiency to 65 points, Big Sills, they can't score. They run into this lull every time. And, it's kind of like I brought it up earlier on College Basketball Today with Kevin Walsh. I know this sounds crazy. Maybe Calvin Sampson goes and gets himself an offensive coordinator. Go get yourself an offensive guru. Someone that understands a little bit more the pace, not the pace, but the spacing of the NBA to create better shots for his players.
If you had to look at the Thursday and Friday rounds, who do you think really has the best shot at winning the national title, Arizona or Michigan?
Oh, no, Arizona's just bludgeoning teams. I mean, what they're doing is just absolutely criminal. What they're doing, and we'll see today versus Purdue. And Purdue will have to slow the game down. I lean under in that matchup today. I think you'll see a slowdown game. Arizona's willing to kind of play that kind of rock fight. Look at Brady Smith over 15.5 points. Both teams have been good, but Arizona is the type of team that if you want to play it at Indy 500 pace, we'll do it. If you want to bring the game into the mud and walk it up and make it a rock fight, they'll do it. Shout out to Tommy Lloyd and what's going on. I'll tell you right now, if you can't get Billy Donovan, then your second call needs to be to Tommy Lloyd, because that guy can do wonders at UNC and scare the bejesus out of Duke and their fans.
Let's go over to the NBA. Isaiah Thomas is back in the news again. Again, this guy has been butthurt since Jordan went up to Chicago and took a city from him and didn't put him on the initial dream team here. He made a comment saying that Chicago Bulls team with Scottie Pippen, if KD was on it, they'd have still won 6 NBA championships if you had taken Jordan off that team. Your thoughts on that comment by Isaiah Thomas?
Big Sills.
I'm sorry for asking the question.
but Big Sills, listen, Kevin Durant is one of the most gifted offensive scorers that I've seen, like, in my lifetime, right? I would put him up there with him, Carmelo, Alex English, Bob McAdoo, these guys, Adrian Dantley, right? Just great, prolific scorers, right? That could score the ball many different ways. He wouldn't have been there for 6 rings, because if he would have tried to go through the bad boys and lost, he probably would have left. And that's why the game is different. And here's the thing, folks, remember, where's Isaiah Thomas from? Chicago. Him and Mark Aguirre, they were the prodigal sons. And then the bad boys came, and he became the villain. And Jordan became the hero. Michael Jordan is the greatest, and I'm talking about this now, and we got to get away from the GOAT debate, right? But if you want to talk about competitor in the 80s and 90s, no one wanted to win more than Jordan. He would drag all them suckers to the finish line. That is not how KD is built. No disrespect to KD, one of the best scorers of all time, but that is laughable, and that continues to show how butthurt Isaiah Thomas is for the fact that Jordan took over not only Chicago, but the NBA.
Outside of Steve Kerr, think about all those superstars that were on that Chicago team. Once Jordan left the NBA, what'd those guys do? And that includes Scottie Pippen. They didn't win anything.
Scottie Pippen, look, Big Sills, Jordan done left, and it was like Cinderella. The clock turned midnight, and the carriage became a pumpkin, And they all became pumpkins. It didn't matter where Scottie Pippen went. It didn't matter Horace Grant when he went to Orlando. That flamed out. Dennis Rodman, all right, you know, a little crazy, but Dennis Rodman's still Dennis Rodman. All those guys. That is a credit to Michael Jordan and what he has built, because he is arguably the greatest leader in sports, maybe, right, in that era, along with someone like Mark Messier, who did it with hockey.
Absolutely. Talk about leadership, like you said, of any sport during the 80s and 90s. I mean, there was no better leader in all of professional sports, not just the NBA, than Michael Jordan. Coach, we appreciate you. Thank you so much. We're going to talk to Rob Donaldson next. We're going to talk some MLB opening week next here on SportsGrid. All right. Is there any better time of the year when you were talking the start of Major League Baseball? I mean, Major League Baseball's first week, you know, back in the day when I was a young guy, it used to be April 6th where you had Cardinals and Cubs. Now it's a little bit more spread out. Rob Donaldson joins us now here to talk some MLB. Appreciate you doing this. And I'm first going to start it off with the obvious, my Yankees. Do they have enough pitching? And is that team a good enough defensive team to take the American League?
Well, you know, it's kind of interesting, right? Because over the past couple years, it's been like Anthony Volpe's in this lineup for defense. And a lot of what they've done is got guys who had a lot of versatility positions of, hey, you can play both corner outfield spots. You can sub in at center if needed. You can play a lot of the infield spots. We want versatility in our lineup to take advantage of different stadiums. And now I think the Yankees are just saying, hey, let's overpower with pitching. Let's not even have to have kind of fielding be like our repertoire or our kind of main focal point. And I think when you do look at this staff, just the pitching rotation, the starting rotation, and also the depth that they have in the bullpen now, obviously the point of emphasis is there. And it's just about basically dodging what the Dodgers had issues with last year and what the Yankees had issues with, injuries. You know, it's a game of fruition attrition rather at the end of the day. And they do have some, pieces in the minors that if need be, they can go make deals for more guys. But as it currently stands and, knock on wood that injuries are all good, I think the Yankees pitching is in a really good spot to make a statement this season.
Well, here, let me just throw one last question at the Yankees on you here. Aaron Boone's got an under 500 record in the postseason, and Brian Cashman and him haven't won a World Series in quite some time now. I think if the boss is still around, them dudes are not in the building right now. You tell me, I mean, when does it get to a point where Brian Cashman and Aaron Boone have to deliver?
Yeah, you can't just kind of point to injuries forever, right? I mean, obviously they've had a lot of different weird injuries at unopportune times. Garrett Cole last year. You can go down the whole line of just key players getting hurt, but that can no longer just be an excuse when you're the Yankees and you can hoard talent and you make all the deadline moves. I thought he should have been gone already, to be honest with you. So I'm kind of in that boat of, hey, you can't underperform with these types of resources and these types of players. But I would say this has to be the final year. If it's not, maybe Yankees standards have kind of changed over my lifetime.
All right, now you know who Met fans are, right? They turn their hat inside and out every October, and then they go back to being Yankee fans. So, is this the year Juan Soto and the Mets get it done in the National League East?
It's still tough, right? And a lot of those teams have gotten actually significantly better. And I think obviously the Mets are one of those teams that it kind of feels like it's been building up to a really phenomenal season where they're flexing their muscles of the financial side of things. They have a lot of talent. They have a lot of pieces, both in the lineup, both in depth, and both in the pitching rotation and even the bullpen. I do question whether or not, top to bottom, this lineup, it's really good. It's really promising. There's some upside pieces that could really surprise me, but at the same time, I don't think it's the most domineering lineup in the NL East. And so I do feel like it's still a little bit of a prove it. But when you have this amount of money invested, the prove it has to be proven pretty early. So I think we're going to know within just the kind of first couple months here whether or not they're for real.
Okay, so let's go to the Dodgers here now. Again, Andrew Freeman has built a hell of a roster up here. It would be the first time we've seen a three-peat actually in baseball since those Tory Yankee teams. And you even go back into the 70s with those Oakland A teams of Reggie Jackson. You tell me, if you had to take a bet here, the field or the Dodgers to win the World Series, who are you taking?
My goodness, I'd probably take the field because there's a lot of investment in a lot of different parts of baseball, AL and NL, but it's not a bet I feel a lot of conviction in, right? I mean, you look at the Dodgers and what they went through just with pitching injuries last year. I think there was a time where they had all five starters on the IL, including like five bullpen pieces, and they still didn't care because they could score 10 runs. That's kind of who the Yankees should be, right? Just hoarding a bunch of talent, having the pieces in the minors to say, hey, these are expendable because we're just going to go spend in free agency either way. And I think ultimately that's always going to make Dodgers a perennial contender. And even when you're looking at the NL picture, there aren't a lot of spenders, kind of like the Dodgers, and there's not a lot of teams with that level of talent. I still feel like they're the best team in baseball, but the field, depending on what odds you give me, might be appealing.
Absolutely. Hey, dude, when you look at Dave Roberts, the manager of the Dodgers, you think he's underrated? You just made a comment about how he handled, and if you even go into the World Series and how he handled the pitching staff in the series against the Blue Jays, you think he's one of the more underrated guys? I mean, he's a Hall of Fame manager right now. Look at the World Series titles he has. And I mean, you look at Bruce Bochy and what Bochy did a couple of years back and where he is right now. You think he flies under the radar as the best manager in baseball?
I tend to think he does, and it's I think it's easy to say when you have that much in terms of resources that yeah you should be performing probably at the level that he's been performing at. But we saw him handle, and I had to relook up his name because Will Klein last year when they were going into that 20 inning game or whatever it was, and Will Klein out of nowhere is throwing 60 or 70 pitches and going deep and actually performing well. That's just kind of who Dave Roberts has been, rather like the entire time he's been in LA is they've had significant injuries. It's not like it's been just a breeze walk of, hey, you have all the talent in the world. That talent has stayed healthy, and then they've just underperformed with said talent. No, they've had guys go on the IL that they just couldn't afford to lose. And then out of nowhere comes this random guy from AAA throwing fours up in the ERA numbers, and he goes out there and shoves for the first time in his start. And so I feel like at some point, whether or not that's the organization or whether or not that's Dave Roberts' management, delegation's a real thing. Who you hire as a hitting coach, pitching coach, et cetera, is a real thing. I think Dave Roberts knows how to manage talent, and that can't be overlooked, in my opinion.
All right, who are you opening up the wallet for today and making some of those picks?
Yeah, I'm looking at a really fun game. Texas Rangers, Philadelphia, and I think when you're looking at DeGrom, you ride him until you can't, right? And in terms of ride him until you can't, ride him until the arm falls off, which most likely is going to be like May. So I would say get your bets in before he inevitably gets pulled midway through a great start. And look at that, DeGrom is not playing. So as I got told in my ears. So my first five angle takes a little bit of a hit. At the same time, part of that angle also features Aaron Nola on the other side, just kind of getting tagged up on a regular basis early in the season, year after year, the last couple of years. And I do feel like the Rangers, from that standpoint, have a good lineup with Nimmo at the top now being that addition to really get after a guy who gives up a lot of hard hits. So if you're looking for a sneaky offensive explosion today, look at the Texas Rangers lineup to put up some numbers here.
Gee, go figure. DeGrom not playing. Wow, what a
Oh,
reach that is, right? Okay. Hey, the
my
arch
goodness.
enemy in Boston, do they have enough power up there, in your opinion, this year to win the American League East?
I thought they did last year. I felt like they underperformed with a lineup that had a lot of kind of those upside pieces that didn't really materialize down the stretch. And that's what unfortunately did them in. Now it kind of feels like they have a better foundation than last season. And so I am going to be taking a lot of first fives because, a starting pitcher on the other side is easier to kind of game plan for. You're going to see him at least 2 or 3 times through the lineup. And when you do have an aspiring lineup to really perform at a level that they didn't last year, that's where I really start to think you see the offensive explosion numbers that we just mentioned with the Rangers, for example. I feel the same way with the Red Sox. And so target that first 5 market on the run line for against Cincinnati, but also look at those team totals as well. And I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised.
Boy, I'll tell you what, the American League this year, too, with what the Orioles did in the offseason here, it's going to be it's going to come up with what their young players are going to do and whether their young guys step in. Also, you got to look at the Blue Jays there. No, Bo Bichette, he goes over to the Mets. Yankees, as you said, are going to be right there. Boston, I don't know what the Rays are going to do. They're probably going to finish in the bottom of the cellar of that division there. But, boy, I'll tell you what, man, American League East is awful competitive this year. And you could probably see the American League champion come out of that division. More with Rob Donaldson next right here on SportsGrid.
I know you didn't. Talk.
I'm innocent. Got the wrong guy. It wasn't me. I didn't do anything. Okay, it was me. I did it.
Bringing an owl to an interrogation? That's a power move.
Every time. Yeah.
Hiring America's largest injury law firm for your injury? That's also a power move. Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm.
How much do you think tanking is hurting the NBA right now, too, and what we're seeing, like we saw with that Jazz and Orlando game a week ago? How much do you think that's hurting the game?
I can't wait until professional sports in the United States adopts a European model, especially like a Premier League model, and they start doing relegation. The day you start doing relegation, everything changes. Everything will change.
Outspoken with Dan Sileo, only on SportsGrid.
Well, I ended up adding this since our show started here, Rohit, but his points prop tonight at 20.5 is the same number from the Iowa State game. That's a bit of a mistake, right? When we consider the gap in opponents here. I think Peterson specifically steps up. He needs to. I think he kind of owes this team a great performance.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid.
Class is in session. Today, let's talk about the teaser. A teaser is a multi-leg bet where you shift the point spread in your favor. You get better numbers, but every selection has to win. It doesn't matter what you bet if you don't have the insights. Tune into SportsGrid and get ahead of the class.
I know that Florida lost at home to Auburn, and it's a real thing that happened. So you can't strike it from the record. But if you did, I think Florida's looked like the best team in college basketball for about 2 months. And I think there are a bunch of results that suggest that.
College basketball today, only on SportsGrid.
All right, more with Rob Donaldson here on Sports Grid. And hey, now you've turned into a punchline, the DeGrom punchline. Hey, a stiff neck. Maybe we'll be back in 2 weeks here. Hey, as we heard that he's not going to go today here. Real quick before we get into the NCAA tournament, Seattle. I mean, do people sleep on this just like they did in football with the Seattle Seahawks? Cal Raleigh and that team, I mean, how good are they going to be this year?
Yeah, and I think that they're a perennial slept on type of team because if you put any of these pitching names, whether it's the bullpen or the starting rotation on, say, the Yankees or the Dodgers, people are acting like, this is the kingdom come. This is adding like a Nathan Eovaldi 1 through 3. And so I look at that and I say, okay, well, they don't get the necessary publicity because Seattle maybe hasn't got over the hump to the World Series yet. And then they go out there, they have a catcher hitting 50, 60 bombs. And then they also add Brendan Donovan to this lineup. They have Julio Rodriguez. They have these names that just kind of feel like get lost in the wash. I don't get it, man. I think Seattle's one of the top 5 teams in baseball this season. And I think they do have the upside to win it all. They even have the trade chips in the minors to make deals at the deadline to kind of round out this roster if need be. Again, attrition is going to cost a lot of these teams that chance, but I think Seattle's deep. I think they're extremely talented. And if you're not backing them right now when you can at a good, decent price, you might not get that chance in 2 months from now when they're rolling.
Rob, I know that everyone talks about Ohtani, Juan Soto, and Aaron Judge, but Cal Raleigh last year, Bob Nightingale told me of all the position players in Major League Baseball, he's graded as the highest defensive player in all of baseball, and he's behind the dish. So when you got that guy, and he's a switch hitting home run hitter on top of that, I mean, because he's in Seattle, do you think if that guy's in New York, we're talking about a completely different narrative with this guy?
Oh, the narrative is exploding in the sense of like this guy is box office. He's hitting bombs. It feels like every third at bat, he's ripping one towards the wall. And so, yeah, if you put that in Yankee Stadium, for example, with the short porch and right, I think Yankee fans and a lot of people in the national media and whatever else are just gushing over this guy. I still think to an extent they are with Cal Raleigh in Seattle, but they play so late. Not everybody catches those eyes. They're not always on the Fox channel or ESPN or whatever it may be. And that does hurt them a little bit. But yeah, I think people are gushing 10 times over if Cal Raleigh is in any bigger market right now.
All right, let's do a bounce pass here to the NCAA tournament here. We're now at Elite Eight. Who do you like so far and what you've seen so far as we're now in the Elite Eight?
Yeah, I mean, how can you not just look at Arizona and just say, I mean, this team looks incredible. And to an extent, I do think maybe that can play into almost an overinflated market in terms of the spreads because, spreads exist for a reason. Just because a team is rolling doesn't mean they can't get hit with a crooked number here and there. At the same time, the way that Purdue is as a 2 seed, just the map painter kind of the way that they performed in the tournament in spots rather than those kind of big time upsets, they have gone deep in this thing multiple times over the years recently. I do feel like the Purdue credit is helping out this Arizona line today. And so I look at Arizona and I think they're going to lay that number and cover. But I think the other team that a lot of people really aren't kind of giving the proper attention to, and I don't want to say the Hawkeyes, the team they're actually playing, it's Illinois. I mean, they're as physical as anybody. They just punked Houston. That does not happen usually when you're talking about an offensive physical style game to win a rock fight and dominate it. And we haven't even seen Keaton Wagler in terms of, his upside as a scorer in this tournament yet. That's playing a lot of averages. It's bound to happen. And I think Illinois can win in a lot of different ways if they get that chance.
All right, Ollie Frazier, you missed it here. UConn and Duke here, Here we go. Talk about a rock fight here, man. I can't wait to see this bad puppy. 3 minutes left in that game against St. John's. St. John's was up in that ball game, but Duke and Boozer took care of business. They got it done. And, people are telling me here, Rob, that UConn's not the same team that won that back-to-back national championship a couple years back. But here they are again, Elite Eight. What do you like here?
Yeah, it's going to be a fun matchup because the second that Cam Boozer gets an and one kind of tentative, softer foul, Hurley's gonna lose his mind, and I'm so here for it because I love the spectacle. Obviously, you have two great coaches, or two just great programs and brands, and heck, Shire might be on his way to being a great coach as well. But you have that kind of blue blood dynamic at play with UConn Duke, and ultimately, I do think that UConn getting this number, it almost feels like too high for a reason. Maybe I'm gonna fall into this trap, but I think UConn's been the more impressive team, rather, kind of leading up to this point because, yeah, Duke kind of dressed up that TCU game. It felt like a one possession game throughout the game. Felt like they even had a chance to lose against TCU. Final score reflected a 20-point win. Last time out against St. John's, they were down by like 10 points with 8 minutes to go. Found a way to win. And then against Siena, the 16 seed, which, yeah, Siena might have been a little bit underseeded, but they gave them a run for most of the game. And so I do feel like Duke playing with fire, almost kind of like Purdue in a sense, it's eventually going to rise to the surface and they're going to get got. And I do tend to think it's going to be right here against the UConn team that just went through a war with Michigan State.
You mentioned Illinois, but I'm going to throw another team at you here that, are you surprised? Tennessee, I mean, the Volunteers have just been quietly going through their job here. They're taking on this Michigan team who, people could say Arizona and Michigan are probably your favorites maybe to win the national championship. But I mean, tell me about this Tennessee team.
Yeah, Tennessee, I think, plays tournament style basketball. And, the Rick Barnes narrative of failing in March, I think, stems a lot more from his days at Texas and early stages of Tennessee rather than the last 5 or 6 years, because they've been a frequenter of the Elite Eight. And anytime you're a frequenter of the Elite Eight, a lot of coaches cannot claim that sort of brand. And, Rick Barnes, for whatever reason, he's good. I think that he's just kind of built like this forever because of how he failed with Kevin Durant. Certainly, he deserves a little bit of criticism for that, I would say. But this is a new sort of style of Rick Barnes where they are bullying teams. They are playing that old school basketball. And that might be the market inefficiency right now of so many teams going finesse, so many teams going for scoring, that this drastic style change just disrupts everything. And so I do think that Michigan is going to have their hands full. I think Michigan has the physicality to match it, though. That's why I'm willing to lay it with Michigan. But yeah, Tennessee, they've been very, very impressive.
Hey, 10 seconds. Who gets that UNC job?
Hope it's not Ben McCollum. And that's pretty much all I got to say about that.
I wonder, man, because again, maybe they go outside the family, and they end up not being with a North Carolina guy. Rob, appreciate you, man. Sileo says Mets are up to doing Met things next here on Sports Grid. right, Mets doing Met things here as usual here. And hey, listen, so I've got to put this out here to you. So the national anthem was being played at the opener of the Mets game, okay? And by the way, okay, Christopher Jackson, who plays George Washington, okay, in the play, I want you to hear his rendition of the national anthem. Let's do it.
Proudly we at the twilight's last gleam, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. So proudly
Hey, what? What?
we're so gallantly
Wait, what?
and the rocket red the bombs
Hey, my friend, it's or the ramparts we watched just to keep score here on the national anthem. But hey, I got something for Met fans. You had a complete disaster in the opener here. Bet the Mets to win the National League East. Win the East. You couldn't have more of a disaster on the opener having a guy who plays George Washington. George Washington, he messed up the national anthem. Folks, if you are a Met fan, this is without a doubt a sign of great things to come. You have already pre-disasterized yourself. You have yourself an opportunity now to have a big year. Hell, I'm going to say you may even have a 1986 New York Mets season here. You started the season off with a train wreck. And now, guess what? You can't have George Washington mess up the national anthem at the home opener. Very Mets-like. I got to say, as a Yankee fan, I've been telling people this all the time. We're going to get Stu Jackson on in the next segment. And Stu was up there in New York with the Knicks for a while. He's now the commissioner of the WCC. So we're going to be talking with him. But guess what? Here's who Met fans are. Every October, the New York Mets, they turn their hat inside out and they go back to being Yankee fans. This is without a doubt, okay, a precursor to the National League East. Congratulations to you, Mike Cardano. Your Mets are going to go on and win the National League East. And you can't have a better start to the season than screwing up the national anthem. God bless the New York Mets, man. Hey, you know what? Again, at the end of the day, we all know this. Juan Soto and that $1 trillion payroll that the Mets have. Met fans, Jet fans, who else? Mets, Jets, Nets. Okay, well, we all know where those teams lie. Because in New York, you're a Knicks, Yankees, and Ranger fan. Everyone knows you root for champions. If you are a Met fan, you live in misery. You are a miserable human if you are a Mets fan. For all the things that happen to you each and every single year, the greatest thing that you get a chance to see is the apple and the guy jumping out of the hat. Hey, I missed the days of Shea, but this is a really good sign of the New York Mets season coming up here in 2026. I've got great expectations for the Mets this season on winning the National League and maybe beating the Phillies in the National League pennant. We'll see. Dodgers are going to be in that too. But hey, how can you be the guy who plays in Hamilton and miss the national anthem? And the guy, by the way, now I'm starting to think that this day may have been pre-orchestrated here. Okay? I mean, hey, you got to figure it out. It's a Met thing here, right? So you've got to figure he blew that thing on purpose to give it's like the reverse juju. You know, a guy screws up and helps out your season as you go forward for the rest of the year. Maybe Juan Soto ends up hitting 350 home runs and 120 RBIs because of this. I've got nothing but great things to see for the New York Mets this year. What a great Mets moment. You put that on SNY on a loop. Hey, remember this with the Mets too. Here you go. Ready? 69, 73, 1986, 2000, right? And you keep putting that on a loop, got yourself an opportunity. maybe to win yourself a National League East crown because the guy screws up the national anthem. Congratulations to you. I got great things thinking for your New York Met fans. I could just see Met fans doing this in the stands too. Yeah. Don't worry. I think it's a great sign this year. Get all your misery out of the way. Hey, Carton, get all your miserable things out of the way, because I think you guys are going to have yourself one hell of a season this coming season. All right. We're going to talk some college basketball, maybe a little bit of NBA, and we're going to talk with Stu Jackson, former Knicks coach, and he's now currently the WCC Commissioner, and we'll get his thoughts also on the tournament. That's all coming up next, right here on SportsGrid. Truly one of the greatest times of the year is the NCAA tournament. Welcome to Hour 2 here, Outspoken. And we're so proud to be able to catch up with the commissioner of the WCC. He is Stu Jackson. Stu, been a great year this year. And first and foremost, I appreciate you doing this. And let's start it out with your conference. I mean, your takeaways on a review of what you guys have done during the regular season and what you guys did in the postseason. Just give us your takeaways here on the WCC.
Yeah, the key takeaways, Dan, and thank you again for having me on the show. I truly appreciate it. It's always a pleasure. The West Coast Conference, as many of the fans know, we're what would be characterized as a mid-major conference. And for us to get 3 teams in the dance, our automatic qualifier in Gonzaga and then 2 at-large bids with Santa Clara and St. Mary's, that's a good year for us. And fortunately for us, Gonzaga went on and actually won a game. Santa Clara probably should have won a game if not for, some end of the game, faux pas out there on the floor. But it's a good year. And, it really is a signal with Gonzaga leaving our conference next year that we still are going to be a viable, nationally visible conference. And that pleases me.
How about this too, Stu? With the selection process of the tournament, are you happy with the way that the selection committee picks the teams, or do you think there needs to be an adjustment on that?
Yeah, Dan, as you know, I serve on the men's basketball committee, and it's just for me personally, I will say it's a true honor to be a part of that committee, in part because of the great leadership of Dan Gavitt has had over the years. And I would just tell fans that in terms of, our ability to select and seed and scrub and ultimately bracket teams, it's a process that is mainly science and some art. And I think over the years, the data probably proves that, we tend to get it right most times. Now, every year, this year included, and every year in the future, on the margins, there's always going to be questions about bubble teams. And those 6 to 8 teams, at the end of the day, they have resumes that all have deficiencies. So you're in a position where you have to make some decisions, with the 12 members on the committee on who gets in, and unfortunately, who's out. And that's a really tough process, and it's a process that we take extremely seriously because we understand the impact on the institutions, coaches, and the players on whether or not they get in a tournament or not. But by and large, I think that we hit the mark, which is, I think somewhat validated by the fact of how exciting this tournament has been in terms of the matchups.
Absolutely. We're looking forward to talking to Dan Gavitt next week as well. So again, are you a fan of the expanding of the tournament from 68? A lot of people are talking about that. Where are they in the process? Where are you guys in that on potentially expanding it?
Well, the process of potentially expanding it really is on hold until after the tournament. It's no secret that discussions are ongoing between the NCAA and our network partners. And at this point, there's been no decision that's been made. And if I couldn't begin to calibrate where it's going to fall, I mean, that really is in the hands of President Charlie Baker, Dan Gavitt, and our network partners.
Okay, for you, the West Coast Conference, you talked about Gonzaga leaving the conference expansion. I mean, are you guys actively looking to add to the WCC? Are you going to stay pat, or is that also in a process right now?
Yeah, no, we are, Dan, it's a good question. We're actively and aggressively continuing to add new members. This year, you may have noticed Seattle University was one of our new members, and they, quite frankly, a little bit to our surprise, brought a lot to the table. I mean, they've got an excellent coach in Chris Victor. They perform very well. They got selected in the NIT. Next year, we'll add the University of Denver. The year after that, it will be UC San Diego, which will bring us to 11 members in the West Coast Conference. We would like to get to a 12th member to just further stabilize our league, both on the financial side and the stability of our membership.
What do you think the WCC is going to look like in 2 years? And I could really ask this question to any commissioner in sports, football or basketball, Stu. What do you see in 2 years with the WCC and where it is?
Well, you're starting to see, Dan, quite candidly, the stark separation in basketball between the Power Five conferences, inclusive of the Big East, and the Power Four, and the mid-major and the lower major conferences. That delineation is becoming greater, which makes it more of a challenge for conferences, mid-major conferences like ours, to get at-large teams in. The automatic qualifiers in all of the 32 conferences, that will remain, but it's really getting those extra at-large teams in for mid-major conferences. That's a true challenge. And, with Gonzaga leaving our conference, it further enhances that challenge. So it's incumbent upon us as a conference to continue to try to strengthen our conference from top to bottom, continue to aggressively schedule to try and build resumes to be in at-large teams. And if we can do that in the future, albeit that there's been this separation, I still think this conference, particularly the West Coast Conference, will have an excellent chance of receiving additional at-large bids.
Do you think one of the problems, Stu, is the scheduling itself? I mean, these power conferences right now are not really going outside and really going outside the power conferences when they're talking about matchups. Do you think this really needs to be more of a balanced schedule, or do you think that has to be open to conferences like Mountain West, WCC, conferences like that to be able to have the ability to be able to profit a little bit from what the NCAA is generating. Look at the money that's being generated right now in college sports. I mean, if you want to grow the WCC, this has got to come through scheduling during the regular season, no?
Yeah, it's interesting, Dan, and you bring up an excellent point, but I don't want to place all the blame on the Power 5 basketball conferences. In recent years, those conferences have expanded, right? And in at least two of the conferences' cases, their conference schedules have expanded. So when they have more games, it takes inventory away and off the board for conferences like ours to play them in the non-conference. So they're not totally to blame. If you want to blame anything, blame realignment. But that being said, listen, mid-majors is becoming more difficult. That is a fact, to schedule Power 5 teams. But it can be done, but you have to be willing to do some extraordinary scheduling to make it happen. Like you may need to play Power 5 teams on more neutral sites. You may have to be willing to go to their place twice and hope that they return to your location once. So you have to work deals that are a little bit unconventional. But I think, with a lot of effort on schools like ours, on their part, it can be done. And that's not all teams in our conference, because some teams in our conferences, like other conferences, are rebuilding. They're at the bottom. They're not going to go out and schedule a bunch of really difficult games. But for our teams at the top, it can be done, but it does take a lot of effort, and it's getting tougher.
Absolutely here. Hey, Stu, hang with us here. Our great friends at Morgan & Morgan, the #1 injury law firm in all of America, for a reason, folks. It's because they win. This great firm has been put together with John Morgan and Ultima Morgan. I tell you about what they did for a family in Pennsylvania. They initially got $650K. They ended up getting nearly $30 million in a settlement for that family. Or the family in Florida that was initially offered $350K. They ended up getting nearly $12 million. This will be the easiest decision you ever make. Go to forthepeople.com/big sales or pound law 529. That's forthepeople.com/big sales or pound law 529. And do me a favor, you tell them Big Sales sent you. We're going to talk more college hoop with Stu Jackson. We'll get his thoughts on the Elite Eight and also his thoughts on NIL and the transfer portal. We'll do that next here on SportsGrid. Truly, with one of our great friends here, Stu Jackson, the commissioner of the WCC, here with us here on SportsGrid. We were just talking in a timeout, and next week we're going to get Dan Gavitt on, the director of the NC2A tournament, and you were talking about his dad, Stu. So Senior was really the pushing force and driving force for the original Dream Team?
Yeah, many people don't know. I mean, first of all, Dan Gavitt Sr. was just an outstanding human being, aside from, being a great basketball person and someone that was committed to the game. But you may recall, at the time, he was a part of, USA basketball. I believe at the time he was probably running the Celtics. But it was really in collaboration with David Stern, true collaboration, because in part it was Dan Gavitt's idea to form the Dream Team, to have this super team of NBA stars. He had one criteria that he'd like to have some inclusion of college players. Hence, Christian Laettner was actually on that team. But a lot of that was driven by Dan Gavitt along with David Stern, and is part of basketball history that I think a lot of people don't know.
Absolutely. He's responsible for the Dream Team and also the Big East. That's quite a resume that he had there, Dan Gavitt Sr. here. Let me take you back to college basketball. The effect of nil. How has that had on the game of basketball, in your opinion, and how does that affect a conference like WCC?
No, I think, NIL has had both a positive and a negative effect, Dan. The positive piece is it's provided some opportunities for student athletes and players all around the country to actually participate in the financial piece of the pie. And that's just the right thing. The way the financial model, of college basketball and sports in general has changed over the years, they deserve a piece of the pie, and I think it's great. What has happened, though, the negative side of that is right now we're in a phase, and I stress it is a phase. It won't always be like this. It's just a free-for-all. And it's a free-for-all because when you involve money, when you involve revenue in terms of player procurement and paying players, to do it without any rules borders on insanity, because it's an unsustainable financial model that we're living in currently. But I have hope that either with the intervention of the federal government, that at some point we will have some rules to help us govern the revenue sharing with players. And when that happens, I think we'll be in a much better place. And I still hold out hope that actually will happen, because currently the way we're going, I really worry about the sport and the ability to sustain this.
Stu, do you think that the sport of basketball, or maybe even college sports, needs a commissioner? Because what I think you're talking about is guardrails, right? And the NCAA is not really the governing body any longer when it comes to this money. I mean, they're losing case after case. So in your opinion, does it need to be restructured a little bit with an ultimate commissioner making decisions, or maybe a board that can make these decisions? How would you go about fixing this?
Well, listen, I mean, it's an idea that's been suggested. I'm not sure that one individual and a staff is necessarily going to be able to correct all the ills. But what you are implying, and I agree, we do need structure, we need guardrails, but that structure and those guardrails could actually begin to take shape if the federal government gave the NCAA an antitrust exemption, which would in part, reduce and minimize the number of court cases that we're experiencing currently. And again, I do hold out some hope that will happen, because if you take the NCAA out of harm's way, meaning harm's legal litigation way, I do think they have the ability, and have proven in the past, at least in the recent past, the ability to govern themselves under the leadership of Charlie Baker. So that would be the first sort of attempt at this. But, to say that a commissioner in one broad brush is going to fix all the ills, I'm not quite there yet.
So the transfer portal, in your opinion, do you look at the transfer portal as a positive or a negative for a conference like WCC?
Yeah, it's a negative for all conferences. We're going through this currently. We have players, very good players in our conference and the West Coast Conference that are deciding to enter the portal. They're entering the portal at the same sort of rates that the players are in the Power Five conferences. So it hurts all of us, right? Going forward, I really like to see a system that's crafted like in professional sports, where you give at least the schools or the institutions that have those players, if they transfer, give those institutions in school the ability to perhaps revenue share at a higher level than the teams they want to transfer to incentivize them to stay. I mean, what a simple concept, but it makes sense, because right now, and I don't blame the student athletes if they feel that they can get a better offer financially somewhere else. Well, sure, they owe it to themselves to look at the market, and that's what they're doing.
Real quick here, being the commissioner at WCC or coaching at Madison Square Garden, walking out there like Red Holtzman out there and being at MSG, what do you have more fun doing?
Well, a little bit of an apple and orange. I mean, to be able to coach the New York Knicks is an opportunity of a lifetime, and one that I will never forget and always cherish. But I will say that in my current position as the West Coast Conference, it's something I dearly love. I'm working with a great group of people on our staff and a group of presidents in this conference that are committed to all rowing in the same direction. And I couldn't be happier.
Absolutely, Stu. I love you and I appreciate you doing this for me. You always find time for me. Great success to the WCC. I know that thing's going to continue to grow under your tutelage and under your leadership. That's exactly what it needs, is a guy like you. Thank you so much, Stu. I appreciate you doing this, my friend.
No, anytime, Dan. And and enjoy the games today and tomorrow.
You got it. All right. We are going to talk about the MLB's TV deal. We're going to do that next, right here on SportsGrid. Truly one of the greatest times of the year is the opening of Major League Baseball. As a kid, I remember a storyline I was telling the guys prior to coming on the air that, there I was at Shea Stadium back in the day. And you don't ever forget being in that moment when you're there and you meet your idol and you see your hero and Tom Seaver coming out of the dugout. And I'm like, there's 41 and there's Tom Seaver. Kid, do you have a baseball? I'm like, no, I got a program here. He signs it for me. And everybody remembers growing up with Major League Baseball and what opening day was. An opening week of Major League Baseball meant. Unfortunately, today, Major League Baseball today and their television deal, I had people telling me in Tampa that when they wanted to watch the Rays versus the Cardinals, they couldn't find it with this MLB.TV. Hey, Rob Manfred, do me a favor, do us all a favor. I don't want to go on and try to go on to an app to try to find my local baseball team during opening week, one of the most important times to promote your sport. You're making it more difficult for fans to be able to log on and sit there and try to find their local teams. 1150 Zulu, channel number 9. I mean, guys, even the Yes Network is struggling with this stuff on promoting the sport. You got one of the greatest times of the year, and this is baseball's opening week, and the fans can't find their freaking game. Come on, guys. Make it easy for me. This is why the National Football League is running circles around you. The Yankees and the Giants opened up with Netflix on opening day on Wednesday, and people had to search around through that there with Netflix. By the way, Trainwreck, they had to do the promise ads back to many of the advertisers because that thing was a train wreck. I mean, listen, make it consumer friendly for me to be able to watch my favorite baseball team. I'm out, dude. When I have to go through hoops just to sit there and try to watch a Major League Baseball game, and you got me on MLB.TV, Hoss, you're not making it conducive for people. Also, the automatic ball strike and challenge system. Okay, listen, I'm not sure where I'm at with this. It's all technology now. I get it. It's challenging the umpires on balls and strikes. But folks, let's go here with this here. If you're telling me that we're going to go technology-wise to try to improve the game of baseball, help me out here and try to improve the game for the fans to be able to watch their favorite players play. Make no mistake about it, friends. Major League Baseball's got a horrible television deal. You've got one of the greatest products in all of sports, and nobody can find them during this time. I mean, look, ESPN bailed on them, and Rob Manfred never came through with another television deal that made it friendly for players and fans to be able to connect. Hey, one of the things that I was able to do when I was a young kid, I connected with Tom Seaver. I had a chance to go and watch him play at Shea, or I had a chance to go and watch a Curt Schilling pitch, or I had a chance to go and get a signed baseball from a guy like Curt Schilling. All of that stuff is how you made the game close. Fans and the players at one time back in the day were close. Now, with technology and all of these television packages that we see, you've got fans trying to jump through hoops just so they can watch their favorite baseball team and their favorite baseball player. I mean, guys, like I said, I got numerous people for the folks down in Tampa that were telling me they couldn't find a game. And you had to put a zip code in on their cable service on whether or not they had to pay another additional $100 on their cable. So just like the National Football League, hey, if I want to watch a game on the holidays, you mean to tell me that I've got to buy Prime Video, I've got to get Netflix, or I've got to go and get Paramount, and I've got to add that to my cable bill? You're making it more difficult for fans today to be able to root for their favorite teams. I yearn for the date. I grew up in an era where, get this, you had Tony Kubek and Joe Garagiola on the Game of the Week. And I didn't really care what those teams were or who was playing. It could have been the Twins and the Royals, or it could have been Cardinals and Mets, and I don't care. Because it was one game, it was the game, and it was the national game of the year, of the week. And for me, get this, when I was a kid growing up, I was on WR watching the Mets, or I was on WPIX watching the Yankees. They never televised home games back in the day. I was fortunate to be able to have two teams in one city that gave me the ability to be able to fall in love with the game. And I did fall in love with the game. Hey, look, I may have played pro football, but I grew up a baseball fan. And I will always be a baseball fan because that is truly America's pastime. How can you be America's pastime with a horrible television deal? Back in the day, people just died for this week. April 6th, it was Cardinals and Cubs. That's how I remember growing up. Traditional opener, and then having the game presented in my respected area so I can fall in love with my favorite players. One of my favorite people. Folks, this is a treat. He is without a doubt one of the best big game pitchers in Major League Baseball history, my friend Curt Schilling. He will join us next, and we'll talk about the game he loves right here on SportsGrid. You know, there's very few people in history that you just put out there on the mound and you got to get yourself a win. And here he is right here with us. He's my friend Curt Schilling. He joins us now here. And Curt, another season, Major League Baseball. I appreciate you doing this, brother. And do you still get jacked up for the start of baseball?
Nope. No, it's been so long. I no longer have a team. I played for 5 teams, you know. I root for individuals. I root for the game, I think, now more than anything. And, you know, I want to see good baseball. Last year's World Series, I didn't have a dog in the hunt, but I rooted for the game, and I think the game got a great World Series. And kind of that's where I'm at from a rooting perspective.
How about this, then, Curt? Do you think the game's in a good place right now?
I don't think it matters because I think there's going to be a significant work stoppage coming up. I don't think it can be avoided. I don't think there's any chance they avoid it. And I think the chaos in the Players Association with Tony Clark's problems aren't going to help.
How about this, Curt? If there's an issue in baseball, in your opinion, what is the biggest issue between players and the teams? What do you think that problem is right now that really you think is at the forefront of this?
It's no different than the NFL and the NFL owners and the NBA and the NBA players trust. The owners lie and have lied for forever. And I was on the labor relations board or the player committee and a player rep for 10 years, and I was in the 94 lockout, and I was in the negotiations of the 94 lockout. And not only do the owners lie, but they lie to your face. And it's almost like it's almost like we are with our government right now, in the sense that you can't trust anything anybody says. And when that's the leading element of the relation, and it's changed a little bit. And I think that there's less, I don't want to say less involvement, because I don't think that's the case, but I think there's less intensity from the players' side, because the situation has changed so dramatically. And when the average salary is $4, $5, $6 million, I don't think the priorities are different. I just think things have changed. But there's going to be an enormously negative labor stoppage. I think that this is going to be the one opportunity that they're going to have to get a salary cap. And I feel like the players, I hope the players are unified enough to hold off.
How about this? Do you think this is going to be more devastating, maybe, in your opinion, than what you went through in '94, where it really damaged the game? Do you think this is going to be in that conversation?
Here's what I don't know. The social media landscape has changed. The world has changed from a media perspective so dramatically. I heard you talking earlier about the TV problems you have with the TV package. The problem is, from Major League Baseball's perspective, this isn't a bad TV deal. They got enormous amounts of money. That's the win-lose for the baseball, for the owners, is how much did they make? Because they have, unfortunately, on a local level, baseball has priced out the average everyday consumer. And why on earth, think about this. Do you know of any for-profit business in the world that would shrink its audience?
No.
Right. Well, why are Major League stadiums getting smaller? There's no 60,000 seat stadium anymore. They're 35,000 seat and 40,000 seat, because they're charging more price, and their luxury boxes don't take up as much space. And that it's about revenue. And so it's weird. And when you think about it like that, but the social media landscape has changed so much. I don't know. This could be 10 times more damaging, because people have 1,000% more opportunities to be entertained outside of, the only thing that baseball holds over everything else and other sports right now, they're the last form of real-time entertainment. Because with social media and entertainment the way it is, I can watch what I want, when I want, where I want, except for a live sporting event. And
Absolutely,
they will always
yeah.
have that. And when they lose that exclusivity, or when they play fast and loose with that, I think that's going to be a problem.
Do you think that it's lost its national luster and become too much more regionalized because of TV, where now today, I mean, as I was saying back in the day, Curt, I didn't care what the game of the week was on Saturday, whether it was Royals or Twins. I didn't care. It was baseball. I wanted to watch that. Then I got a chance to watch my local teams. Do you think baseball's kind of lost that touch with the fans a little bit?
I don't know that it's lost the touch, because if you look at numbers, attendance is up. All of those things are up. So the metrics by which, again, what you and I measure as successful, or what you and I believe to be joyful entertainment, doesn't necessarily align with what Major League Baseball does, says, or cares about. And that's where you got this dichotomy. The new balls, and the new rules. The new ABS system, I disagree with a lot of it, but that doesn't affect their decision making. And I as a pitcher, as a former pitcher who thought the umpires were wrong far more than people let on, I like the ABS system. But you're going to have problems, because umpires are going to start having issue with the fact that they're being called out. Well, here's the thing. Umpires are now going to be treated like players. They're going to get publicly embarrassed when they make mistakes in front of the fans. Well, welcome to the game. Welcome to the big leagues. You got it wrong.
So you
struck
love
out.
the ABS. You love the ABS.
Well, I like that aspect. I like that aspect of it, that umpires are now held accountable in real time. Like players.
Wow, so technology.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, so like, Curt, for you, I mean, you're on the hill there. I mean, you get 2 challenges. Would you'd be out there challenging it yourself, right? Because the players get to challenge it.
Well, yeah, but here's the thing. You got to remember, one of the things that gets lost in a 300-pitch Major League Baseball game is the fact that every single pitch is crucial. And, let's just look at an NFL game where a team gets, let's say they get 70 offensive plays. Every single one of those plays is as important as the last or the next play. It's hard to understand at the big league level. Fans look at, it's 300. He only missed 5. Well, those 5 could have been at the most crucial moments of the game, or they could have been consecutive, or they could have, perfection is something I think you should strive for when you're officiating. It doesn't happen for players. We don't get perfection. We understand that. That's why there's only been 16 perfect games but you still strive for it. And the fact that umpires are now held on a level of accountability that the players are is something I like. They're the quote unquote the best in the world. I mean, listen, the DEI is in Major League Baseball because the lady that's the umpire, I've watched her game. She's not that good, and it has nothing to do with her being a female. It just has to do with she sucks. I mean,
Hang on, Curt, can we do another segment here, Curt?
Yeah,
I want to continue this.
Good. Yep.
We're going to do another segment with the outspoken Curt Schilling here on Outspoken. I'm going to get a sense of where he'd be in today's game if he was towing the rubber. That's next on SportsGrid.
You wouldn't have your ex officiate your wedding.
Do you, Jake? Liar? Cheater? Gaslighter?
So why have anyone but America's largest injury law firm handle your injury case? With over $30 billion recovered for our clients, there's a reason to go big.
Gaslighter, coitus crier, he's got more red flags than a bullfighter's attire.
Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm.
How much do you think tanking is hurting the NBA right now, too, and what we're seeing, like we saw with that Jazz and Orlando game a week ago? How much do you think that's hurting the game?
I can't wait until professional sports in the United States adopts a European model, especially like a Premier League model, and they start doing relegation. The day you start doing relegation, everything changes. Everything will change.
Outspoken with Dan Sileo, only on SportsGrid.
I ended up adding this since our show started here, Rohit, but his points prop tonight at 20.5 is the same number from the Iowa State game. That's a bit of a mistake, right? When we consider the gap in opponents here. I think Peterson specifically steps up. He needs to. I think he kind of owes this team a great performance.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid.
Class is in session. Today, let's talk about the teaser. A teaser is a multi-leg bet where you shift the point spread in your favor. You get better numbers, but every selection has to win. It doesn't matter what you bet if you don't have the insights. Tune into SportsGrid and get ahead of the class.
I know that Florida lost at home to Auburn, and it's a real thing that happened. So you can't strike it from the record. But if you did, I think Florida's looked like the best team in college basketball for about 2 months. And I think there are a bunch of results that suggest that.
College basketball today.
Hey, if you have an outspoken show, you should have an outspoken man. And we got Curt Schilling here with us, and he was talking about the umpires being called out by this ABS. And let's continue that conversation here. And I mean, Curt, you think this is going to be eventually a problem for these umpires being challenged?
Well, again, I mean, we've complained forever. I know as players, and I think I've heard a lot of fans sense of it this way. Why aren't the umpires held to the same accountability system that players are? If you're not performing well in the big leagues, you should get sent down. And they finally started creating this grading system that umpires are graded on. And one of the challenges of the grading system, and I talked about this early on, was the grading system took away the margins of the strike zone. The umpires were graded on the center of the strike zone, but not on the perimeters, where in the big leagues, that's where you have to live. I don't get to live in the center of the strike zone. It's like playing football without a center, right? I mean, so I like that. I like that they're held to the. Listen, we're watching over the challenge system at first base on the bases. Umpires are getting it wrong 50% of the time. It's in some insane number. And so if they're going to get it wrong 50% of the time, then it stands to reason you could have a fan do the job and just guess if it's 50-50, and then it can't be. I mean, I don't know if you remember the Cardinal Royal World Series. Don Dinkinger blows that call at first base and changes the outcome of the World Series. Hopefully those moments are gone. So I mean, it's where we're headed as a society. We're perfecting technology and we're implementing AI to the point where human jobs, human occupations are being taken over. And technology is perfect from a mathematical sense. The strike zone's this wide and this high, anything inside that, things like that. I'll tell you what my one big problem with the strike zone, the ABS system is, look at the rule book. The rule book strike zone, my pitch has to cross the plate at the front, anywhere in the front, which means if I cross the front corner of the plate and angle off, it's still a strike. If you look at the ABS system, I'm pretty sure they're measuring the strike zone in the middle of the plate. That's a different strike zone.
I got it here, man. All right, today's game, Curt. These guys go 5 2/3, if that. You got these things called openers now, 2 2/3. I mean, nobody's coming out and taking the ball out of your hands 5 2/3 in a game in your time. That ain't happening. In today's game, how would you have adjusted to that?
I wouldn't have. I was raised with a very different mentality. But let me be clear. It's not their fault. It's the game's fault. They, number one, pitching is so broken as to be hard to watch, because the game. There are, I would argue, less than 20 true pitchers in the big leagues. There's a couple hundred throwers. I mean, it's a craft, it's an art, and when you go, the Picasso of our profession was Maddox, and you don't see the Maddoxes anymore because. And listen, I'm not oh my God, the Ivy Leaguers are ruining baseball, poo-poo. I mean, I think there's I like a lot of the metrics. I like the ability to calculate spin rate, to understand breaking balls, and if I'm coaching, that's helpful. But the hunt for velocity has destroyed pitching and physically is ruining the pitchers. I've said, and it's funny to watch fans get defensive. I'm not ever commenting at a personal level when I talk about pitchers and things like that. I'm commenting on someone who's done the craft and understands it. I look at a guy like Bubba Chandler for the Pirates, and I made a comment. He had an outing in spring training where he couldn't find the strike zone, and he went 2/3 of an inning, walked 5, blah 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 blah. And my comment was, Bubba Chandler could show up 5 days from now with that same exact stuff and throw 4 no-hit innings, and it's exactly what he did. And people were like, "Oh, quit hating! It's early in spring training." Well, bad mechanics don't have an expiration date or a set-in date. They're just present. And these guys, the hard throwing, and it's understandable. But I want to tell you something. It's understandable because velocity gets you drafted. It's almost always gotten you drafted, but when teams are drafting, I know teams literally will go into the draft never having seen players they draft because the metrics tell them otherwise. And the thing that blew me away, I've talked to a couple general managers about this in depth as I scout for the draft and teams look for advice about pitching and stuff. And I think I was ignorant on my part initially. I kept trying to explain to these guys, the game, pitching's broken, here's why, blah, blah, blah. And the response I got was breathtaking, but actually incredibly revealing. Two of them said to me, I know it's broke, but I'm being paid to win. So I don't have the time to fix it. So I'm going to use what I have with the time that I have to try and win. And recognizing these throwers, I talked to a general manager who acquired, I think, 4 or 5 young minor league pitchers over a trading deadline. And he said, I told my baseball people, don't plan on 3 or 4 of those guys ever seeing the big leagues. They know they're going to get hurt before that. And my response is, why don't you change the mechanics? We don't have the time to change the mechanics. So what we do is our max effort guys in the minor leagues, we put them on pitch counts. The guys with better mechanics who don't max effort, we let them go longer. Instead of fixing it, they just utilize the asset to maximize the value with disregard or no regard to length of tenure. Well, you know what? He's going to be gone in a couple years anyway. So, you know, and it's how they judge. It's a very like cold system from a personality perspective. Well, you know, he's a max effort guy. He's gonna break, but we're gonna use him as long as we can, ride him as hard as we can, and when he breaks, he breaks.
Curt, I want to talk about you in your career. One last segment here. Do you have time for me here? One last segment here. I want to talk about this man's great career. And on top of that, he hates when I bring this up. He hates when I bring up the Hall of Fame. But I'm going to bring it up anyway, because this man here, you want to know big game pitching? This is big game right here. And we're going to talk to Curt Schilling about his career and also about the state, again, of pitching in Major League Baseball today. We will do that next with the legendary Curt Schilling, and we will keep you right here on SportsGrid. You know, one of the most impressive resumes you'll ever see is Curt Schilling's resume. 216 wins. I mean, I wrote the numbers down here too. You're talking about 83 complete games. The man started 35 starts numerous times. Innings pitched over 260. What do you think, Curt, for you was your most impressive line that you had in your career over 20 years?
Well, I always go back to one number. My favorite statistic when I look back on it was in 2001, I threw 306 innings. When you count the 48 innings I threw in the postseason, and of those 306 innings, the best 48 were the last 48. The 48 innings I threw in the postseason, I made 6 starts, I think, 3 in the World Series. Yeah, 6 starts, and I threw. You know, that 01 and 02 were my most dominating years. I just so happened to be pitching with Randy Johnson, which was kind of fun. But I was always an innings guy because I was taught that innings were the most important statistic for a starting pitcher. And so 35 starts, 7 innings a start is 245 innings. So that was my number. That was my goal. It wasn't. And it was funny because, you know, Johnny Padres early in my career asked me about that. And I told him, I told him some others, he asked me the most important stat. I said something, you know, young and naive and stupid. And he's like, no, it's innings pitched. It's innings pitched, because if your innings pitched is the right number, then all your other numbers are going to be where you want them to be, because you're not going to be out there pitching if you're not getting outs and pitching innings. And so that was always my goal. And that's one of the reasons why I think, you know, I get it. The game has changed dramatically from a pitching perspective, but what we don't have anymore is the Darth Vader versus Luke Skywalker matchup, right? The antagonist, the protagonist, the Koufax versus Gibson, Randy Johnson versus Maddox, Clemens versus Pedro, right? Those were marquee matchups. You know, now the only one I can think of that I might go to see is Skeens versus Skubal. That doesn't mean there's not other good pitchers, but they've been de-emphasized. And they used to be, you know, the betting. If you look at Vegas, like the betting lines were always weighed towards the starting pitcher, skewed towards the starting pitcher. It's much less that case now. Not that I'm, you know, advocating gambling, but it's much less the case now because the starting pitcher is much less of a factor in the final outcome of the game than they used to be. And I don't think that's a good thing.
Curt, the ring that you have that you cherish the most, is it the Red Sox or what you did with Randy Johnson with the Diamondbacks? If you had to put one first over the other, I know they're like kids to you. Give me one.
Yes. I can't. It's funny because, you know, I got asked that question after we won in 04 by people in Boston, and they were incredulous. They were almost offended when I said that 01 was as meaningful as 04, because 01 you had 9/11, you had all the things that went on with that. You had Yankees Diamondbacks. You had Randy and I in the year that we had the team that we had. And you know, all the things that, and you add to the fact I grew up in Phoenix. Now move ahead to 04, you know, wow, it was amazing and it was unbelievable to be a part of, but I wasn't here for the 86 years before that. And, you know, yes, I got swept up in it and I was a part of it and I felt it. And I watched 3 million plus people at the parade, in the largest sports parade ever. All those things. But there was less of a personal piece in that to me than, you know, and then, you know, the ankle and all the other stuff. So I could never, if I was in a house fire and I had to take one out with me, I would stay in the house and probably burn rather than let one go. I just can't. I can't.
Absolutely here. All right. 20 seconds here, Curt. Are you looked at as a Philly, Red Sox, or a Diamondback?
You know what? I don't know. I honestly do not know. I don't have a clue. I don't, you know, I spent 10 years in Philadelphia, so it's kind of hard for people to see me without the Philly P. And then in Arizona and Boston, there were iconic things that happened.
Curt, I love you so much, man. Thank you so much for doing this for me. You're
Oh,
always
my
finding
pleasure.
time for me, and I really appreciate you more than ever,
Well,
man. Talking baseball.
I've always loved our friendship. You're a good person. There's not enough of you in the world, much less in the media. And I'm glad to see you making the jump to this and growing your audience because you deserve to be seen and heard.
Thank you so much, Curt Schilling. That is such a great word for you. Thank you so much, my friend. Peace out there,
Take care,
my
buddy.
friends. You just saw the great Curt Schilling, and we appreciate each and every single one of you. We will have you on Sunday as well, and we'll see you on the flip side.